Welcome back, everybody, to the Omniverse Comics Guide podcast. I'm your host, Eric Anthony. Thank you for joining us again. Our next guest on this creator spotlight interview is a long time podcast pal of mine. We've been podcasting together for a while on the Cave of Solitude days. He's a beloved creator from my hometown. He's the writer of Black Hole Hunters Club, Deep Sea, Happily Ever After, Millennium Bomb, and of course, a new top shelf graphic novel that we mentioned on our incoming episode. It's coming out September 2024, Undergrowth. It's none other than the Portuguese prince himself, the man who loves his chips, Ricky Lima. Ricky,
Hey,
welcome to the
yo.
Omniverse. How's it going, buddy? Woo!
Good, good. This is so fancy. It's a new
Bop, bop, bop,
podcast.
bop.
It feels so nice.
Yeah,
You
it's your
got a new
first time
mic.
here. I got
Yeah,
my
new mic with the this is a video podcast. Usually we're doing audio only. So
right. We've done some guerrilla style podcasts at restaurants with the forks and knives clanking everywhere. We were just,
yeah,
on site at Fan Expo, but yeah, now we're gonna be on the YouTube, forever immortalized. Because
oh
now we
yeah.
got to talk. We got to have an epic. You call this. We're gonna have the most epic podcast
Yeah. All
in
right.
comicdom, right? We're
Let's
doing
do
it.
it. I'm
This
ready.
is it.
3 hours.
Um, so on the, I guess not the eve, but depending on when people listen to this, Undergrowth is about to come out or will have come out, and it'll be new as this podcast is released. Congratulations, by the
Thank you.
way. I remember when it was a Kickstarter, those first couple issues were coming out.
It wasn't a
It
Kickstarter.
wasn't a
No,
Kickstarter?
I funded it all myself, baby.
That's
But
a
I can see
beautiful
why
thing.
you thought it was a
Well,
Kickstarter.
I forgot to mention in your bibliography, you're also one of the co-founders of Cauldron. Like you've been behind a couple of successful Kickstarters in your time. So
Yeah, Cauldron's a pretty. It's raised a lot of money on Kickstarter. It's crazy.
yeah, so you've got, yeah, I gotta say, you're a guy who you never think anything isn't an idea to go after, right? It doesn't,
Yeah,
you gotta just go for it.
that's true. I think I just like doing cool stuff. You know what I mean? So it's like if someone's like, "Hey, you want to do this?" and it's like I have the time, and I usually don't have the energy, but I'll make the energy, and then I'll do it because I like doing cool stuff. And what else am I doing? Just sitting around at home, like you might as well do something.
Might as well do something. I think that's a great attitude.
Yeah.
Since this is your first time in the Omniverse, let's take it right from the top or to the beginning, as it
All
were.
right.
Um, Hometown guy, just like myself, but you're from Brampton. Tell us what it was like growing up in B-Town. What were the things you were into as a kid? What sparked the imagination of a young Ricky?
Oh man. Well, so I'm like the youngest of like I have three siblings, so the youngest of four, and they're all like super older than me. Like the closest one to me is 7 years older, and then my oldest is 14 years older than me. So like growing up was a whole lot of like just watching TV because everyone else was doing, teenager things, you know? So it was a lot of TV, a lot of video games. The Simpsons essentially raised me. So I feel like that's like where my love of storytelling comes from. You know what I mean? It's like just watching all that stuff and being inspired and like being like, well, maybe I can do that, in the future. So, and then you kind of grow up reading comics and because like, was it the Spider-Man and the X-Men series? Those were huge in the 90s, right?
Right.
So growing up, I was watching that stuff, reading the X-Men comics. Well, and it wasn't even like comics like sequentially. I would read whatever my brother was like reading or just picking up. So I don't think I ever read like a sequential story in the 90s. It was just like whatever random issue I could pick up.
I
And
think
then yeah,
that's the case for a lot of kids, though. Like that was the charm of comics, right? Is that you can step in and out of these universes and kind of pick up where you left off, and you never really cared. It was just fun
and that that's kind of what's missing in modern comics is like you
a
can't
little
really
bit.
just pick it up and like be like, oh, okay. But I don't know. I guess Marvel's trying a little bit. It's not like, super difficult, but it is a little difficult.
But I think that's what the point of like podcasts like ours is, right? To kind of direct people because the landscape of comics is so vast. Like there's just so much to pick from. You
Hmm.
don't know where to begin or what's worth your while. So I think at least now people have channels where we can kind of help people, direct them. And if you're into this, you're into
Yeah,
that. But it is hard, man. It's not easy. Not like when we were kids. You just went into like a
pick up.
7-Eleven and you just picked up an issue. That's cool.
Yeah,
I miss
exactly.
those days.
But I mean, if you're the solution to the problem, I feel like Marvel should be paying you money to do
I
that.
wish.
Like,
Tell them.
you
Tell
know,
them, Ricky.
it's all passion. That's they see these companies, they take advantage of your passion. You know what I mean? So
So you said The Simpsons and the animated,
yeah.
Marvel television shows inspired you. What was your first introduction to comics that made you say like, this is there's all of these animated shows, but now there's this even more kind of niche thing of storytelling. What
Well, I think Maximum Carnage, that series in the 90s, that was the first series that I was like obsessed with. I remember reading, and I didn't even read the whole thing. I had issues like 1 to 10, and then I had like issue 12. I think I missed like, there's a couple in the middle that I totally missed. But I remember reading it and I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And then they came out with the Super Nintendo game, and I was like, oh my God, this is the best. So I was like a huge Maximum Carnage guy. So then I read that and I was like, well, it is awesome. But then kind of like in the end of the 90s, early 2000s, when I was like going into high school, I just kind of stopped with comics. I don't know why. But
what
then
replaced it? What was it that took its spot?
um, I don't know, maybe video games and playing guitar. I think that replaced, so like music and video games, I think replaced comics like a
I didn't
lunatic.
know you played guitar. That's very cool.
Yeah, yeah. Started playing in grade 10. But then once the comic writing got more serious, I stopped doing music. So yeah, I
Can you
let
still
it.
play the guitar?
No, not as much, but like I probably could still play a little bit, but
Were you ever in a band?
I would like with my friends. I was in a band, like a garage band called Molly Ring Walrus. And and the logo was a picture of Molly Ringwald, but with a walrus face. So,
Right.
and then our first single was "Fuck Dean Blundell" because we didn't like him too much. He was too mean on the radio. We were like, why is this guy being so mean? So so
It
that
sounds
was
on it, it sounds on point for a Ricky Lima band. I like it.
you don't gotta be mean. Anyway, so that kind of derailed me from comics. But you're still kind of in the early 2000s, you're still aware of comics, and like the X-Men movies were coming out and stuff, like the
Right,
Fox
right.
stuff, and Spider-Man too. So you're still kind of into it. But then I read the Dark Tower series, the Stephen King novels, and I was like, man, these are the best. And then Marvel started coming out with the Dark Tower prequel stories. So then I was like, oh, well, I got to read those. So I started picking those up and then going to the comic shop every week, picking those up, or every month. And then I got exposed to other stuff and I was like, oh, what is this? And then I think that was the time that like Watchmen was coming out, the movie. So then that kind of exposed me to graphic novels and like 300 and stuff. So then you start picking those up and then you're like, oh, there's more to comics than, just like weird superhero stories. So then I was like, yeah, okay, maybe I could do this. So then I just started writing comics, working with David Bishop. Deep Sea was the first book, and here
Was
we
that your
are.
first book that you did?
Yeah, it was a 8-page like short of the comic, and then we expanded it into a graphic novel.
That's such a cool graphic novel, especially with the concept of just using certain colored ink pens to draw
Yeah,
the whole thing on David's part. That was very cool.
yeah, yeah. That was like that inspired the whole thing, that color scheme. The water and the blood, and I was like, oh, let's think of what we could do. So.
S-
Originally we did it because it was like, oh, we could save money on printing, but
Right.
it wasn't the case. No, it still costs the same amount if we made it full color. So
You learned your dork. Turned out. So with the Dark Tower series, what was it about the, because I hear a lot of people who have read that become very like enthralled with those books. Were the
Mhm.
prequels, did they live up to what you were reading in comic format? Did it satisfy whatever you were hoping the prequels would be?
Yeah, I think so because it like really. So the way the Dark Tower is written, it's the first three issue or the first three books are like, or maybe the first two. I don't remember. They're like sequential in terms of like that, but then yeah, no, okay. The fourth one then goes back and tells like the backstory of the gunslinger. And then the Marvel comics tell the space in between when book four ends and when the first book starts. So that's kind of like that in between. And it's written by a woman called Robin Firth, I think her name is. And she was so after Stephen King wrote like issue or book four, I think he took a really long hiatus and like wrote other stuff. And then he hired Robin to like make a compendium of the Dark Tower so that he can get back into it. So I mean, she knew tons of stuff about the series. So like reading it from her, like what she obviously knew a lot, and then just kind of filling in the blanks. So it was like super accurate to the story. And then what was his name? Jay Lee was the doing the art. Jay Lee's art is so like so wicked. So that's really kind
Yeah.
of I think Jay Lee's art was what drew me to it. And then as I was reading it, I was like, oh, this is actually pretty good. So then you kind of go from there.
So did you become at that point, I guess, like a Wednesday warrior once you saw like this is
Yeah.
happening? And yeah, what was your comic shop that you would go to?
It was Stadium Comics in Brampton. So I would go there, and then eventually I just started working there. And then that was,
That
and
was it. You were in.
yeah, that was it. I was hooked.
How many long boxes did you accumulate?
Man, right now I have like I think 7,000 comics.
Really?
There's a lot. And it's so uh, I'd say I have them all in short boxes because I don't know, I guess that was what I was buying. But I think I have like 40 short boxes, so that would probably be like 20 long boxes, maybe.
Do you still keep up with the weekly stuff coming
I
out, or you
tried
just
to, but like during COVID, it got tough. And then Stadium left the mall that they're in, and then they went like pretty much online only. So then it got really hard to like order stuff. So I tried to keep up, but eventually I was like, well, maybe I could just save my money. So
it is a difficult hobby to keep up with, man. And COVID definitely did a number on like the habit of how you were getting your comics or even how you would read them. Definitely for me. So I totally get you. In your creative process, what fuels your imagination? Is it reading things that your peers are doing? Is it exploring just like whatever comes your way and then amalgamating all of these ideas in your head over time?
yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for me is like just reading stuff and then being inspired by that. And I'm mainly inspired by like bad stuff, if that makes any sense. Like, because like I'll read something and I'll be like, well, that was garbage. How would I make that better? So then you start thinking about, okay, well, all right, what if this happened? What if that happened? Or well, what if, you know, so what if you move this over here? And then eventually you just kind of develop your own story. So a lot of the things I do are based off of other things, but just like different. You know what I mean?
I
So
would
like,
I would hope they're different. You don't want to plagiarize them.
yeah, that's true. Because then I'll throw in all my own experiences. I'll throw in all this stuff. So it's but I feel like that's how everyone is. Like you're inspired. Everyone's inspired by something.
Deep Sea was an interesting book with David Bishop as your first one. Where did you go from there? Where did your imagination take you from that point on?
So from Deep Sea was Black Hole Hunters Club. We did that pretty much a year later, and that kind of came up just from me meeting Shane, right? Like I met
Shout out
Shane.
to Shane Heron. What's up,
Shane's the
Shane?
best. Has he been on Omniverse?
I don't think so. He
What?
will be. He
But
will
you
be.
guys do the Seinfeld podcast.
Yeah, we
So
do. We podcast a lot.
do you still do that? Is that still going on?
No, it's on a hiatus right now. My Cave of Solitude site needs some work, so that's got
Mhm.
to come back around.
But yeah, Black Hole Hunters Club, that was
Yeah.
like Shane. He was like, "Well, I've been working on these character designs." And he was showing me the character designs and tell me the basic kind of story that he had for it. And then I was like, "Cool, man, let's do it." So then I wrote like the first 12 pages, and then he liked it. And then we did 6 issues, and then that was like the trade paperback. And then we started in issue 7, but then we just never went on from there. So. And
Got to bring
then
it back. Reunite the team. Get Shane back in the
yeah,
Black
I
Hole
mean
Hunters Club.
we're on the 10-year anniversary now, I think. Yeah. Because that came out 2013. And so 10 years, I guess, was last year. Well, I missed that. But I've been thinking of putting out a 15-year anniversary, putting it out now. and then just being like, well, it will be 15 years eventually. So,
That's
you know,
perfect.
yeah, whatever.
No, it'd be great just to see both of you guys from where you started in 2013 to where everybody is now. It would be
Yeah.
very cool. And I can see it becoming like its own line of comics. I think
Do
you guys should go for it.
behind the creators kind of thing. Be like, where are they now?
But even just relaunching the series, right?
Hmm.
Seeing the team reunite. You guys have had your experiences in creating different things on your own, right? Come
Yeah.
back now with your skills. What's the word? Like sharpened. Everyone's got you've gone, you've trained, come back with the skills sharpened. Now make the comic book that becomes the Image comic. That'd be great.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get Shane on
You know
board.
me, I'm your biggest cheerleader, Ricky. I can't help
True.
myself.
It's true, man. I remember, I think the podcast we did at Fan Expo was basically just me being like, "Oh, I'm shit. And you're like, no, no, you're good. No, that's like the whole podcast, man.
That's pretty much the whole thing yeah, the whole conversation we had. No, this is why I suck. Let me tell you, my stuff sucks. Like this is the defeats the purpose, Ricky. But again, you're the guy that no idea is a bad idea. And even when a person has a bad idea, there's like, what can we take
Exactly.
out of it? Is
Mhm.
that just your eternal optimist in you? Like you're just a happy-go-lucky fella?
Well, maybe, but I think also too that that factors into like me wanting to do cool things, right? So like nothing like if someone were to be like, "Oh, let's go kill a rabbit," I'd be like, "Okay, it's a bad idea," and I wouldn't be enthusiastic to do it. So, but if someone's like, "Let's write a story," and then that's that excites me. So I guess I'm just like into telling stories and stuff, right? Like my in high school, I did improv theater, right? In improv theater, it's all about just accepting ideas and then growing them and then progressing. So I think that's really kind of where it comes from, right? Is like I'm used to taking ideas and then working with them and running with them and then trying to make them better. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But that's life, you know what I mean? Not everything's gonna work. So
But the thing is, you're always productive. Like, do you have for a person who has made a lot of your books, do it yourself, funded them yourself, like you've really done it the hard way, earned your keep. Is there something that you do as a discipline for that you could share with other people who want to be creators or writers that you could say this is in order for you to get to that point where you see, I've got a couple books to sell on the shelf, whatever the case may be. What did you have a certain thing that you did?
yeah, it was something that like really I didn't realize it until COVID hit where so I was going to a second cup near my house pretty much not every day, but like a good maybe 3 or 4 times a week. And I found that to be really good. So it's important to like get out of, your basement and get out of this space and then have a dedicated space for like you sit down and create. And then your brain will start to be like, okay, now it's time to like get started, right? And it's important to go and do that. Even if you do nothing that day, it's important to just be there and be present and try because the trying is the important part. You know what I mean? Because if you try one day and it doesn't work, hey, whatever. Try again the next time. If it doesn't work, all right, that kind of sucks. And then, just keep trying and eventually you'll break through. I mean, maybe some people will never break through. I don't know. But to me, it seems like as long as you keep trying, you're eventually gonna write something down. You know what I mean? And so that's very important is to get out of the house and to do it. So during COVID, that was like basically impossible. So my process really suffered during that time. And it's still suffering. I still find it hard to like get out because I'm so busy. But it's a discipline I need to get back into and like have a space and focus to write. But that's probably the biggest thing is just to like have a space and a dedicated time to just try. And then even if nothing happens, at least you're trying, right? So, and then also too, like taking it slowly. I feel like a lot of people want to just like build this universe instantly and have like 5 books come out by the end of the year. But it's like, nah, man, you can't do that. That's unreasonable. So just do what you can do and then just work at that pace. It'll be out eventually and you don't have to worry about it. Like a lot of times people are like, well, let's have it done for this time. And it's like, hey man, if it's not done for that time, whatever, who cares? And of course, this is me talking as a self-published guy. when you have deadlines through a publisher who's, puts in money and puts in time, you can't do that. So you really have to respect the publisher's deadlines. But for yourself, I mean, just take it easy, man. Don't kill yourself over indie comics. You're making like $2. Like, you know what I mean? So
But I think to your point, it's the being present, making sure you're there where you need to create, right? You can't just I find that a lot of times when you talk about it, it never really happens until you put yourself in the position to do the thing
yeah.
and to be in that space that, okay, I'm here now. Something's going to happen because I've made myself available to the inspiration to connect, right?
Yeah, exactly. And what's important too, I've had a lot of friends who are like, well, let's like meet up and write. And it's like that, no, you can't, I can't be with someone else when I write because now it's a party, now I gotta like talk to you, now I gotta entertain you and stuff. I can't like focus, you know what I mean? So like sometimes like the art organization here in Brampton, sometimes I'll organize like, oh, come and work on your art at our studio and like meet the community. And I'm like, well, I can't go and talk to people and write at the same time is
Yeah.
impossible. So as much as it sucks to like be a loner, you kind of have to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I keep hearing that. Like there's that dedication to the process that you've got to make yourself available to in order for that thing to become something. And what I really respect about you is that you've never really waited for the optimum opportunity to make the thing that you're thinking of making. I find a lot of people are always wanting things to align perfectly for them to finally do that thing that they keep saying they're going to make.
Yeah.
Whereas when I every time I come see, you're like, I made it. I'm like, who drew it? You know, I did. I drew it. This is how
Yeah.
I did it. I found a
Or
way
I
to,
paid for it, yeah,
like, but there's been books where you've even with the Kickboxer book that you've got coming out right now, where it's like
Mhm.
the unofficial adaptation
Yeah.
shot for shot. It's fantastic.
I
But
think
you found a way to do something creative that like there's a novelty to it. It's like, how come no one's ever thought of that before? But because you felt like it, you just did it. And I love
yeah.
that about you.
And so that so I remember, do you remember Astar from the Planet Danger? Those little War Amps commercials from the 80s?
Yes, 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 yes.
There was a time when I was like, man, wouldn't it be cool if we made a comic about Astar and like what he was doing? So then I contacted War Amps. I literally emailed them and I was like, hey, I'm a comic creator. I want to do like a Astar comic.
That'd be so cool.
Right, it'd be cool. And then they're like, no. And I was like, well, that
What a
sucks. Now I
shame.
can't do something because they told me I can't do it. So then I was like really bummed about it. And someone I knew was like, well, you should have just done it anyways. And I was like, damn, you're right. So so for Kickboxer, when I had this idea, I was like, oh, should I contact? And I was like, no, I'm not gonna contact it. I'm just gonna do it. Whatever. Who cares? You know what I mean? And if they want to shut it down, or if they're like, oh, you got to pay me like the money you've made, I'll be like, well, now you owe me money because I've made nothing off of this. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
it's a big thing, man. And also too, I feel like a lot of artists wait for government grants too, which sucks. They're like, well, I'm gonna apply for this grant, and if I get it, I'll make it. If I don't, then I won't make it. And it's like, how about you just make it without the grant? And like that's shitty to say, and I'm sure people, need money and stuff, but I'm sure there's a way you can make it without a grant. You know what I mean? I don't know.
well, I think the point being is like clearly you don't mean it in no like malicious way, but you bet on yourself, right? You bet on yourself basically every time you wanted to make a book that maybe someone didn't understand your concept of what it was you're trying to do, but like, yeah, I got an idea and I want to make the book, and you found a way to do it. And I think that just prepares you for the when the time comes where you do have a deadline to meet. You've made it so that I made sure that I made the things I wanted to make in the time that I made an agreement with myself at the
Mhm.
very least.
Yeah, and like it allows me to build my skills too, right? Like now
Exactly.
I can put out a book without anybody's help. So like this top shelf book, they didn't do anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I basically gave them the book and they said, "Okay, cool, thanks." And then they printed it. You know what I mean? So like pretty much nothing. They're like nothing was done to it outside of them like writing the back copy, and that's about it. I think that's all they did. You know what I mean? So that kind of, reliance on myself and betting on yourself, allows me to like learn and to develop my skills to the point where I don't need anybody. And sometimes I feel bad because like I'll talk to someone and then I'll be like, "Well, you don't know this? Like, what we talk about? This is like simple, but it's not. It's taken me 10 years to get there. You know what I mean? So I have to be cognizant of that. I have to chill out and let people learn themselves. But I mean, I'm
That's
just too
part.
smart, Eric. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we don't call you the prince for no reason, sir.
Yeah,
Let's
exactly.
talk.
Well,
Let's
okay,
talk.
so with podcasting for you, is it the same way? Like you've had to learn how to do audio recording and you're beautifully lit right now. I mean, that must have took a long time to develop.
Well, yeah, I think I was never really one to do the video for one. Now we do a live,
Mhm.
which I'm not, it's not that I'm very good at it but you get into a groove of somewhat of the conversation and the performance to an extent.
Well,
Details of
I mean,
podcasting.
obviously it takes a lot of like emotional intelligence. You got all that, Eric.
Oh, thank you, dude. I appreciate it. But Undergrowth, speaking of emotional intelligence,
Oh, okay, yeah.
this was a story as I read it, and then when I got to the end, I went back to the very beginning and just kind of started browsing through it again. But it feels like, as I read it, this was something you were feeling. There was something important to you in this process of expressing what these characters felt. What was it? Am I wrong, or was there something pressing on your mind at
You
the
know,
time?
I think you're totally right. Like so when I started writing it in the end of 2018, I had finished Happily Ever After and I was like feeling like I was like, well, what's next? And then I wasn't having too great of a time just like living, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't like I wanted to die, but I certainly didn't want to like it was just tough to live, you know what I'm saying? Like so you're kind of just like I would rather not have to deal with everything like just disappear.
Right.
So in Undergrowth, as I was
Hmm.
writing it, like I wanted originally just to write like a big action book, like just robots fighting, and that's about it, right? But then as I was coming up with the story, I mean, obviously it's like, okay, well, why are they fighting? And then that kind of developed the story from there. And then I was figuring out the themes. And like writing is a very like exploratory thing, right? So as I was writing it, I was coming up with themes and ideas that I was like, oh, this is kind of like what I'm going through, right? So then you start developing that, and then it kind of grows from there, right? So it wasn't like when I started it, I wanted to deal with specific themes, but I think those specific themes kind of just like bubbled up out of it, right? So so that I feel like that's kind of where it all comes from. Like the scene with it's not gonna be a spoiler, but the scene with like Red and her mom and stuff, and like that is something that I felt like all the time. It's like you feel like you're being kept down and and not able to express yourself, and it's like, well, why is that? Like what is keeping you down? So then all of a sudden you start doing like irrational things in order to try and break free of that, and sometimes it works, sometimes you get beat up by a giant laser, but hey, that's how it is.
No, it
So
makes sense. I appreciate the insight on that because you sometimes nowadays look at the themes that I feel like a lot of writers nowadays are catering their writing to a personal theme that they want to put out there instead of a story that they want to tell.
yeah.
And it's refreshing when those things when a book has somewhat of a message without it being purposed to have that message. Like they wrote it because I had to tell this story about myself and let
Right.
everyone. But in your case, it's like it sort of melded. As I wanted to tell this action story of just robots fighting, I found myself coping with whatever it was in my head.
Yeah, and it's kind of like you explore different ways of dealing with like trauma and like emotional turmoil through these characters, and like so each character kind of deals with it in a different way. And by exploring that, I'm kind of like, well, all right, which way am I exploring mine? Or like which scenario am I this character or which scenario am I this character? You know what I mean? Like the whole thing about Willow just kind of like giving up is who hasn't felt that, where you just kind of like, well, whatever, I'm just gonna stop trying, you know what I mean, or like stop doing this, and then maybe there's a spark in your life that allows you to like be like, oh, okay, well, maybe maybe there's something here. So yeah, I feel like I want to explore a lot of those themes, but not give you an answer to it. Just kind of be like, well, this is what it is. And then you, as the reader, would be the one who's like, okay, does this apply to me, or does this kind of like work in my life? I think the biggest or the best piece of writing advice I ever got was from someone who said, your audience's imagination is going to be better than anything you can ever come up with. So that's like
Mm,
super important when you're writing,
interesting.
because if you can write something that then triggers their imagination, I feel like then they're like, oh yeah, this is like, what if this happened? What if that happened? And then all of a sudden they've created the story that's like amazing, and you didn't do anything. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden these people are like, man, this is like the coolest story in the world, because they are the ones who are developing it in their heads. You know what I mean? That's why like fan fiction is such a big thing, right? It's because these
Hmm.
people, they're given enough fuel to develop their own imagination as it goes. And then they, sometimes it can backfire on you and you get some like really like weird stuff going on. But for the most
Sure.
part, I feel like it's okay, right?
Yeah, because you care about that thing that you're working on. Like there's a passion for it. It's
Yeah.
true. But with 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 these, like I remember you often telling me a lot of the inspirations and things that you liked just as a fan, things that you were into, and this was kind of like a meld of all of those things.
Hmm.
But there's a would okay, I should have asked you this in the beginning, but what's the elevator pitch? What would be on the back of the Undergrowth book for people to, because we talked about robots fighting each other, but now we're
Yeah.
also talking about like the afterlife and dealing with, certain traumas. So give us the little bit of the
Do you want
elevator
me to
pitch
read
there.
the actual back of the book,
Let's
or
read the
do?
actual back of the
All
book,
right,
Ricky. I
okay,
think
let
I
me
did
read.
it. I think I did it on our episode, but I want you to read the
Yeah.
back of your
So
book.
these guys, they Top Shelf wrote this, and it's so good. It's like way better than anything I ever came up with. All right. So, uh, after Red and her friends are killed by invaders from beyond, they're revived inside massive organic battle mechs. Time to take their planet back. It's a truly epic graphic novel about global crisis, mental health, and giant robots. Um, the world is being ravaged by four terrifying robotic monsters. One fateful night, four friends venture out to watch a meteor shower and come face to face with doom, only to find that their story is just beginning. That line is so good. I always struggle to find a way to say that they die at the beginning, and this only to find that the story is just beginning. So good. Ooh, chef's kiss. That's so good.
That's
And then
great.
it continues, returned to life by mysterious natural power. These young adults are chosen to bear the only weapon that might turn the tide against invaders, ancient towering forest entities, which they can pilot from within. They're enormously powerful, but when you're struggling with the trauma of your own death, is that really the best time to become a living weapon of mass destruction? So, ooh,
That's serious.
yeah, no.
The
So
book doesn't feel as serious as it sounds. That's what I like about it.
Yeah, that's another thing too, is like it's definitely not as serious as it sounds. You
But
know,
but I
jokes.
think that's the cool part of when I finished it. I went back to the beginning and I was, because again, you don't leave, you don't put every single detail for the reader to be like, and now this and this and this. Like some people make, and it's beautiful when they can do it like that, but yours is very much also driven by, we got to give credit where it's due to your artist, Daniele Aqualani. Is that
Yeah,
his
yeah,
name?
yeah. Perfect.
Straight
That's
out
right.
of Italy, right? Mwah. I had to say it right. How did you guys meet up? How did the collaboration come together? Tell us a little about that, because his art really brings to life this, the story's charming. It's got the battles and everything, but there's still this innocence to it because of his art style.
Yeah, he does a really great job of like blending cartoony with like normal, not normal, but like more serious, I guess, more like epic kind of art. And so I met him online somewhere. I want to say Reddit somewhere, but I'm not 100% sure. I can't really remember. But I remember I had like contacted him and was like, "Oh, are you interested in doing a comic?" He's like, "Yeah." And then I just kind of like disappeared for like a month or so and just like working on it and stuff. And then he emailed me again. He's like, "Oh, are you still interested?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, this guy's like serious." So then
Awesome.
I worked like harder to to get the things done. And then I sent it to him and then he started doing character designs. And then it turns out he's like the best comic artist in the world. This dude, he's like a tank, man. He made 3 pages a week for like a solid 3 years and like didn't miss a single week, man. This guy was like
That's great.
unreal. And it's not like it's like bad art. It's like amazing art all the time, consistent. And he has like a degree in comics. He went to in Italy, there's like a school for comics, and he did it. So that's
He
why it's
got
so good, right? And then yeah, like, and it's funny because like the way the story was written, I had written like chapter one first, and then he started drawing it. So by the time I'm like halfway through issue two, I'm seeing art that he's doing for issue one. And then the dialogue starts to change as you see how the characters, like how he draws the characters, like their reactions. And like I start seeing like what he's good at drawing and like the strengths of his
right.
art. So then by the time issue three rolls around, I think I'm like usually pretty comfortable with what he's doing. So then my ideas and like the art that I'm kind of suggesting starts to change, and I start gearing the story towards images I think he would be really good at writing. So like the first issue, there's not a lot of background or a lot of scenery just because whatever. I wasn't writing that much. But then by the time,
Mhm.
issue three and issue four comes around, there's a lot of like quiet, zoomed out shots. You know what I mean? Because I was like, well, what Daniele's drawing is like really awesome sceneries too, right? So then it becomes a little bit more like epic, a little bit more kind of pastoral in that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
No, it was a great collaboration in that regard. So that's you make a interesting point where you say that as you're watching his art come in, it's affecting the direction that you're taking the story, or even the scenes where people will have to have dialogue. You're saying, let Daniele do what he's
yeah,
got to do.
exactly. Like there's that scene in I want to say issue five, it might be six or chapters. Now they're not issues, they're chapters. But
Right.
um where the scientist takes over the other ship. And so that whole scene, when I wrote it, I was like, you have 4 pages, do whatever you want. So he was the one who like choreographed that entire thing, right? And it looks so it was like way more brutal than I had anticipated. So when I saw that, I was like, holy shit, man. But it like works so well, you know what I mean? And like at the end of the day, he's the one who has all the visual knowledge of Undergrowth. You know what I mean? I have all the kind of um, vocal knowledge, writing knowledge of, you know what I mean? So I'm setting the tone for the writing, the dialogue, maybe the not necessarily the pace of the story, but kind of the direction of the story. And then Daniele's doing all the visual stuff. He's doing like the pacing of the visuals and doing all that. So, why wouldn't I let him do that? He knows better than me how that works. So you really got to trust the process, let them work. And sometimes it could backfire on you. Sometimes you can work with some artists who like totally suck,
Right.
but that's the I want to say joy of it. Sometimes it backfires, sometimes it doesn't. It's a gamble. I'm a
Yeah,
gamble.
you're learning on the way. So when you first had the idea for Undergrowth, how far developed was the story by the time the first issue came out, or was it kind of changing issue per issue?
Yeah, I think it was changing. I think originally I had an idea for it to be very like manga-ish, where it was like really kind of cartoony characters. And then when Daniele was interested in the project, I was like, oh, his art doesn't really fit that. So then I kind of morphed it a little bit. And then eventually it was kind of like zombie Power Rangers, what
Hmm.
it was going to be. So they were going to be like Power Rangers, but then they were going to be clearly dead, like to the point where one guy was like holding his head instead of like his, and then one person would be like half of their face was missing, so it'd be like a skull, and
Right, right.
then then I was like, maybe that's a little too much. So we didn't do that. And then it kind of developed from there. And then Daniele put out the character designs. I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then it just kind of evolved from that.
Nice.
So so I and the way I write is like I'll have the whole thing planned out more or less, like maybe like 60% of it. Like I'll have a beginning, middle, and end, but how I get there, I don't really know, right? So then as I'm writing, you kind of explore and develop and figure it out as you go. Because sometimes I'll write a piece of dialogue, I'll be like, oh, that's interesting. like where did that come from? And then you kind of be like, all right, does that factor into something that happens in the future? Stuff like that. And I think that's why a lot of my stories have flashbacks in them because as I'm discovering things, I'm like, oh, okay, now I got to explain that. Let's go back and explain it. So I don't know. I really like flashbacks, but then you don't want every story to have a flashback, so you got to be careful.
It's a balance though, because it's understanding the context or even just like where does this character come from? Why are they the way that they are? I think flashbacks, especially in the comic format, I think they're helpful. I don't think they hurt because you can also put them in, you can space them, make them as long or as short as you want to. It
Yeah.
could be just, and the art can change. It could be very creative, the flashbacks.
But something that I'm running into now as I'm writing other stories, I'm like, this is basically just the same format as Undergrowth, just like a little bit different. You know what I mean? So I'm really struggling right now with trying to not to be like, not to compare a book to Undergrowth. You know what I mean? And that's becoming difficult because I don't know, Undergrowth is probably my most successful book. So I'm like, so the next book I'm writing, I'm like, all right, issue five's got a flashback. I'm like, ah, shit, Undergrowth issue five had a flashback. I'm like, I'm just rehashing my old, old ideas, man.
Yeah, but I think there's also, I think every, depending on the issue count of what the story is going to be, I think there's those moments where like, yeah, issue four kind of wraps up the first part of the story, and then this section of the story will give you flashbacks. I don't think
Yeah.
that's uncommon though in the
Okay.
structure of
Well,
comic storytelling, right? You're
I get
beating
worried
yourself
that
up again. Nah.
I'm worried that I'm just a one-trick pony, you know what I mean? And I'm just doing
Well,
it.
if you're telling the same story, maybe like
Yeah.
is the next story you're doing going to be people that died and being put into mech droids to save the Earth?
Oh no, it's not about that.
Oh, there you go. So it's not, you're not a one-trick pony, right?
All right, fine.
I'm not gonna let you beat yourself up, Ricky. We go through this every time.
I know, right?
Um, so you team up with Daniele. You got those issues coming out. You're putting them out in single issue. I see you at every show from 2018 up until last year. You're like, they're gonna make it into a graphic novel, dude. Like Top Shelf has got, they're gonna print it for us. How did that come together? And was it the fact that they could see like, man, you've got a completed variant cover series? Was it 8 issues
Yeah, eight issues.
altogether?
Yeah, yeah.
But the last couple ones are longer as well, right? You made
Yeah, it's
some.
like a double issue. Yeah.
Look at
So
this guy.
technically nine, I guess.
Yeah, technically. So how did Top Shelf approach you with the whole like, let's make this a thing now? What was that
Well,
like?
I mean, I feel kind of bad because like my breaking into comic story is kind of shitty because it's like I
Why?
well, let me tell you.
Okay.
So, what's his name? Michael Walsh posted on Instagram as like a story being advertising Chris Staros's comic mentorship. And so Chris Staros is the publisher at Top Shelf, and he runs a mentorship outside of Top Shelf, where he will look at your manuscripts and talk about what you can improve, give you tips on like, being in the industry or approaching movie studios, like basically anything, because he's been in the industry for like 25 years, whatever. He's like, he's huge, right?
Right.
And so I was like, well, yeah, I gotta do that. So I signed up for that and I sent him Undergrowth. And when he read it, he was like, dude, this is like, I think the first question he asked me is, why aren't you publishing books yourself? And so he was like asking why I'm not like started a publishing company myself. And I was like, it's too much money, man. I don't got money for that. And he was like, fair enough. So then he was just talking about how much he liked Undergrowth, and then he was like, well, maybe Top Shelf will want to publish it. So then from there, he I guess I'm not sure what the process was after that. I'm sure there's like a team that he like sends it to and they look at it and then he
Sure.
looked at the finances of it. I don't know how that works. But then yeah, we had a call and he talked about it and he's like, look, let's make this happen. And I do think that the biggest selling point for the book was that it was almost done. So when he had read it, the entire thing was done. Like the inks were done for it, and it was all lettered. He had looked at it just as issue 8 was coming out from the printer. And then we had probably up to issue 4 colored. And then so he was able to see like where it was going. And then he was like, yeah, 100% I want to do this because, it's the best book ever made. It makes sense. I get it. He's not an idiot.
Absolutely.
So so yeah, so then he was like, let's do it. And that was in 2021. And yeah, then it took 3 years of coloring to get it done. And like it wouldn't it took 3 years mainly because I don't have a lot of money to pay the colorist, so it was like a little bit slower. And then the colorist lives in Ukraine, and then 2022 there's a little
Right.
little invasion happening, so then she had to really kind of luckily she was
Man,
far away from the Russian border, so it didn't affect her like too much. But I mean, obviously your country's being invaded. You're gonna
things
something's gonna
change.
happen.
Yeah,
But
of
I was
course.
I was surprised she was still working on it. I was like, holy shit. But yeah, she got that done at the end of 2023. Yeah, so that no, mid 2023 she finished. And then we started doing like the editing and stuff and like proof like spelling mistakes and stuff. The book was pretty like we didn't change the book at all. And then yeah, and then at the end of 2023, the book was pretty much done and ready to go to the printer. And then here we are now. So
That's great. It looks great too. The with it colored
yeah.
and Daniela's artwork.
I think the colors is what sold it. I think without the colors, people be like, ah, whatever. But the colors, people when they look at it, they're like, holy shit. So it really makes
Yeah.
the book.
Well,
Yeah.
initially you wanted it to be in black and white. Those first couple of issues were, which is it's cool to say for those of us who actually own one of those original Undergrowth
Yeah.
comics right now that it's the best book of all time and it's going to be winning
Right.
like crazy
Yeah.
awards.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those first printing issues are legit as it gets.
Well, it's funny that you say that I wanted it to be black and white. I mean, I could just afford to make it black and white. I can't afford to color them. So like, and I think that a part of it too was coming out with the book in black and white first gives you incentive to sell people the graphic novel in color later. You know what I mean? A little
I
sales
got your
tip
business mind.
there. So and also too, it's like a fast way of making the book because now you don't have to wait for the colors. So by doing it self-published at black and white, you give the publisher incentive to publish the graphic novel in color. You're working on it faster, and then it's cheaper to produce. It's fun to produce because it's like a little bit faster. So there's a lot of reasons why the originals are black and white and why the graphic novels in color. And I feel like black and white does feel a little bit more like indie cool. It's like an underground zine kind of thing,
For
which is
sure.
nice.
But I mean, even your covers for those original single issues were really cool graphic designs. Like they were eye-popping, like, oh, what is that? That looks legit. You
Yeah, I
did a
love
really
working
nice
with like
job.
different styles and different artists on books because it's always fun to see their interpretations of the characters.
Sure, and that could spark an idea for you as the story unfolds as well, right? Someone's interpretation can make something click.
Yeah, like the that one cover for issue 6 where the robot's holding the baby. Um I hadn't thought of that, and then when he came up with that, I was like, "Oh, that's really cool." And then, I mean, it didn't factor into the story too much, but I was thinking like, if I were to expand on this, maybe he's going on an adventure with this baby, taking him around to different planets and stuff. Who knows?
Right,
But
right, right. So, what did you learn from the book? Getting back to the story itself,
yeah,
what did it leave you with when it was all said and done? Because there's a lot of, dare I say, spiritual aspects to this story. I don't know if you were intending it to be, but there are a lot of even just the idea that no one ever really leaves. We're all just energy.
yeah.
We're always here. So what did you when it was all said and done, what did you step away with?
That's a good question, Eric. What did I? I mean, I guess in many ways it's not done yet. I mean, we're still needs to come out the graphic novel, but I am done writing it. That's for sure. I think what I learned was mainly like if I focused and I like really tried, I can come up with something pretty sick, you know what I mean? Because like for a long time, it's like growing up in elementary school, I always had teachers who would be like, "You're not trying. You're not applying yourself too much." And in many ways, I mean, I guess that was true. I mean, I guess I always struggled to like care about the work. So I guess once I start caring about what I'm doing, that's when I can, excel at what I'm doing, right? So
Right.
I think that's probably the biggest thing I learned is like I got to do stuff that I care about in order to make it work. And then in terms of like dealing with trauma and stuff, still terrible at it. So I don't think I learned anything of that. But I mean, you do kind of explore and you do kind of understand that, there are different ways of dealing with stuff. Like I think like for me, I'm probably closest to that Red character who like is very kind of nonchalant about it and like always cracking jokes and stuff. So,
Whatever.
yeah,
Tries to
right?
brush it
Like,
off.
you know, it's shitty to say, but if my girlfriend was ever like brings up a serious topic with me, I think the first thing would be like a joke, which is like, that's terrible. But that's just who I am, man. I just always cracking jokes. I'm a funny guy. So
But I think that's always to also disarm people, right? Is like you want to let's we don't not everything has to be so serious, so let's laugh a little. It's
yeah,
also
yeah.
like part of the charm, right? It's probably why she
But
likes you so much or
I'm
loves you so
sure
much.
I'm sure it can be annoying. I'm
Oh
sure.
yeah, I've definitely gotten myself in trouble for not everything is a joke. I'm like, shit, didn't go over that well.
It's tough, man. It's tough.
Yeah, for sure. I get you.
Bono, did you learn anything from the graphic novel?
Well, as I'm reading it, I'm also thinking of like what was going through your creative process, like what was on your mind or what was the story you're trying to tell. And it's also telling of the things that you found interesting. Like, as I'm reading it, I'm like, this is a good amalgamation of all the things that mean something to Ricky. But ultimately, it was the peacefulness that that people are looking for when it's all said and done. Like, what is the motivation for what it is that you're doing?
Mm.
Because there's also the book, it's immediate wish fulfillment of like a bad day, like a terrible day at a time where it's kind of a scary time to be alive because the planet's been invaded by some sort of machine. And I think from the time you started writing that book to now, the concepts are they feel a little bit more pressing because
Right.
I think everyone's kind of scared of are we going to be just become a machine society that we've done to ourselves?
Mhm.
And then there's that desire for like, but we also want to just trees and green and life to be do what it does. Like we're at that crossroads right now. So I feel it's and the other thing about the book is that it feels like it could be directed for kids by the way that it's drawn, but then there's a lot of very strong themes in it and sometimes strong language where I'm like, I still think kids should read it, even with the strong language.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important not to treat kids like idiots. You know what I mean? Like they get it.
Exactly.
They understand things even if it's not, and they want to understand things. Like I feel like sometimes a kid will pick up something that they don't understand and will like it just because it's like cool, but then they'll learn to understand it. You know what I mean? They'll figure out what it's about or what these themes are and stuff, right? So yeah, it's important to not treat kids like idiots, you know what I mean? So, because like
I agree.
it frustrates the hell out of me where you'll see like big publishers put out these like YA novels that are just so like checkboxy, you know what I mean? They're like, oh,
Yeah.
it's about this, this, and this, and then you're like, this fits into the curriculum because of this and this and this, and it teaches this, and you're just like, what about a cool story that you just learned from? You know what I mean? And
That's yeah. And
uh,
all the other things that you want, if the story's good, they kind of fall into place without you
right?
trying, I feel. Or
Yeah,
yeah,
it's so frustrating. And they all look the same, and they're all just like these like I don't know, it's just pumped out by these big publishers that you're just like, this is boring, man. What are you doing? But
yeah, I think everyone's kind of becoming guilty of that. And it's like I think ultimately, Ricky, it's people voting with their dollar is gonna dictate what gets made. And I don't know who buys some of the stuff that gets made nowadays because it feels
no,
like paint by numbers. It's just like you
yeah,
said, checking off boxes. And even though sometimes the intent might seem okay, that's nice, but it doesn't feel like a story. It feels more like a message or like this is propaganda that you're trying to put out there in format. It's like just tell a good story and we'll get it.
100%. And like also too, I think when you ask like who buys this, it's the institutions, right? So like these publishers put out books that check all these boxes, and then the libraries or these
Yeah.
institutions are the ones who are like, we are looking to
Yeah.
fill books that check these boxes. This is perfect. So then they'll buy that. Like working at a publisher right now, there's a lot of conversations between is this book like an institution book versus like
Interesting.
a retail book. You know what I mean? So there's some books that do better in institutions because they check those boxes, right? And like
Interesting.
libraries will pick them up, and libraries are huge, and then so your numbers get huge. So you really kind of have to almost cater to like what a library wants, you know what I mean? So
So in Undergrowth, is it an institution book or is it a indie hard rock heavy metal?
well, I think for me, it was written like that. I didn't have any boxes I needed to check. It was just like stuff I was writing. But I do think that it's so good that it does fill all these boxes that these people are looking for. And it does it in a way that's stylish and it does it in a way that's interesting. You know what I mean? At least I think so. So while it does check boxes, I do think that it does it not knowing that it does, it just naturally does it. You know what I mean?
That's what
So
I'm saying. I appreciate that you said that about yourself, that it's so good that it checks the boxes. I'm proud of you, Ricky. That's what I'm talking about.
all right. Well, it's
Uh,
yeah, it's I'll tell you this. I'm doing well, so city council here in Brampton, they have a thing where you can register to make an announcement. And they have city council's meeting in September 11th. So I've applied to like make an announcement at city council to announce the launch of Undergrowth. But then I was thinking, I was like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a video to play where it's like a more confident version of me who is promoting this book versus me who would
di-
probably be like the book is garbage, right? So I've
I think
literally did that today. So that's the announcement today. So
I love it. So when is it officially released that people can get their hands on it?
it officially, well, okay, it's a little weird. It officially comes out September 3rd, but comic shops get their comics Wednesday, so that's September 4th. So depending on like where you get comics, so like if you go to an Indigo, you can get it on the 3rd, but then comic shops won't have it until the 4th because that's just when they sell books, right? So September 3rd, I tell people, let's go with that.
Are you how thrilled are you that it's gonna be happening? I'm so excited
Uh,
for you, dude. I don't know how you feel. I feel excited.
I'm cautiously optimistic, I think. I think like and this is something that I'm actually realizing about myself recently is that I feel like my expectations or what I'm looking to get out of things sometimes is out of line with what I actually get, and that bums me out. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So for putting out this first book after 10 years, you're like, well, yeah, it should be like, why isn't I don't know, IGN talking about this book? Like, is obviously it's huge, but that's unrealistic. You know what I mean? I can't be like, yeah, why isn't
It's
Hollywood
something, it's a
supporting?
foundation to build off of.
Exactly, right? So I think I'm super excited for the book. I think it's the best book ever. But I think my expectations were maybe too high. And so now I'm kind of being like, okay, I gotta just chill out the expectations, be cool about it. Because the book's doing fantastic right now. I mean, it got that starred review in Kirkus. That's like crazy. Nobody gets that. And so,
Right.
it's not to say that the book's doing terrible. It's just I need to realign myself with what is realistic, you know what I mean? So,
No, I think
so I'm
good things are on
excited.
the way. No,
And then also too, I think I put too much emphasis on the pre-launch stuff where I'm like, well, why aren't people talking about it? And it's like, well, because the book's not out yet. Obviously, no one's gonna get it. So once the book is out, then we'll see. Well, I think it'll be good.
it's gonna be good. No, it will definitely be good. And it's just a launching pad for bigger things to come your way.
Well, yeah, and that's the other thing too, right? Is like I put so much pressure. Like once I signed the deal in 2021, I put so much pressure on myself to have more stuff come out, right? So then I contacted like tons of artists and I started like paying out the butt all this money to get art done. And most of those projects fell through, you know what I mean? Most of those projects didn't happen. And then I got so bummed out. I was like, well, I'm a one trick pony. I'm never gonna have another book come out that's good enough to be published, right? So I put so much pressure on myself to be published and to get more stuff published that it kind of ruined stuff. Like 2022 was tough.
Hmm.
It was a tough year to just kind of because things weren't working, and I was like, man, I'm wasting my time. I'm screwing up. And then that's kind of where Kickboxer comes from, right? Because Kickboxer is a book that's literally unpublishable. Like legally you cannot publish that book. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right, right.
So that kind of takes the pressure off of me to have a book be published because now this book I'm working with, like no one's gonna pick it up. So it's like just
You're
do
just
it.
making it, right?
Yeah. So that kind of helped me kind of break out of that the sadness of having some of those projects fall through. But I mean, that's not to say those projects will never happen. It's just maybe they will. It's just I have to, you know.
I'm finding that that's a lot of, even for me, just like it's not comparable to creating a comic book and getting it published. But sometimes even just podcasting, like
Mm.
it's very dependent on another person being willing to show up. Like, thank you very much for wanting to do this today and making, but it does require people being sacrificing of their own time too. And it's not easy to get all systems a go, right? It's just that you keep trying. And when one door closes, like, okay, let me try this one now. And I think you're proof of that. Just keep
Yeah.
making shit and
Well,
shit happens.
and I think too, also it might be like a not necessarily a coping mechanism, but it's a way like I guess I'm like worried to pitch a new story. So I'm like, well, I'll just do it myself. I won't bother with pitching it. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, I should try and pitch it. You
You
know what I mean? I
should.
should. But then I'm like, no, I just do it myself. And it's like, well, I don't know. You're not really trying then, So I should try. And then my mentality is like, if it's good enough, then someone will come to me about it. But it's like, but if nobody sees it, if nobody knows about it, who's going to come to me, right?
Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I guess my mentality is like Undergrowth's going to come out, become like the biggest book ever, and then publishers will be like, "Hey, what are you doing now?"
Everyone's gonna knock on your door. Nah, keep making your stuff, Ricky. That's the
But I
only
mean,
way.
but that's what I'm saying about my expectations. Maybe my expectations are too high. Maybe I need to realign myself to the reality of the situation, get off my high horse, and start pitching
Well,
books. You know what I mean?
enjoy being on the high horse for now because you worked hard at this. You deserve the publishing credentials to be added to your bibliography. And I think that if you
Thank
just keep the course of I'm gonna make stuff because I love making stuff, you're gonna continue to be published.
Yeah, I mean, I'll
Goes
never
without
stop
saying.
making books, right? Like books nowadays, like making a book is the way I think about the world. You know what I mean? Like something will happen to me and I'll be like, whoa, how would I make a little book about that? You know what I mean? Or like,
100%.
yeah, or like there's an idea that in my head that I'm trying to work through and I'm like, what would the title of that book be? And then it's like, or what kind of images would be in that book? But I don't know. I'll never stop making books,
Never
but
stop. Do you got something that you're working on now?
well, there's Kickboxer, and then there's that Soda Pop Pirates book. I don't know if you saw that.
Haven't I've seen the cover of it, but
And
so that's next in the fires right now.
that's next. But then there's those books that kind of fell through in 2021, 2022 that like I'm still in contact with the artist, so it's just a matter of doing it. But maybe I don't know. I don't know what's keeping that project down. Maybe money. Maybe I need to make more money. But
Maybe, but now, Ricky Lima, the
watch
Portuguese
out.
prince,
Yeah.
has Undergrowth coming out in September of 2024, and he's gonna be making it rain.
I hope so, man. Jeez.
You
Yeah.
deserve it, dude. You deserve it. Everybody that's listening, be sure to hit up your local comic book shop or your Indigo, or if you order books online, Undergrowth, Ricky Lima, Daniela Aqualani. Who else is associated with the book? Andrew
Yulia,
Thomas did
yeah,
the lettering.
yeah, Andrew Thomas did the lettering, and then Yulia Shetsova did the colors. And yeah, that's the team, four people doing
It's an
each one.
international book, man. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
I was telling somebody, so I'm Canadian with
Yeah.
like, and the book is like kind of inspired by like manga and anime. So it's like Canadian with a Japanese influence, with an Italian artist, with a Ukrainian colorist, you know what I mean? Published by an American company. So it's like
By the Portuguese prince.
by the Portuguese prince, by Portuguese immigrants. So I mean, so the book is like hits all these different continents, man.
It's the World Cup of comics.
It really is. It really is. And it's interesting because Top Shelf doesn't really work with creative teams as much. So the fact that like they usually just work with cartoonists who do the writing and the art. And so I was a little self-conscious about Undergrowth being on their list because it's like doesn't necessarily fit what they do, because it's not like an auteur kind of creator thing. It's like a something else. And so, but I mean, they're into it. They published it, but I do think because it was done or almost done, they were more willing to do that because it's like working with one single artist because they don't have to do anything. You know what I mean?
Well, that's the key, right? You got it done. You had something to present, and then you delivered when it was time to deliver. And I'm so happy for you, bro. I hope people love the book. It's a ton of fun. Undergrowth from 2018 till 2024, you made it happen, dude.
Yeah, I
I
know,
love it.
right?
You made
Jeez.
it to the Omniverse. Epic. We made an epic podcast together. Fantastic. So where can people follow you, Ricky, before we wrap up, if they want to follow you
I'm
on the social
on
medias?
Instagram at King K Rule, king.k.rule. That's like where I'm most active, I'd say. And then Twitter, I barely use, but I've started using it recently because got to promote stuff. So that's King K Rule as well. And yeah, that's about it, man.
Perfect.
I'm on
For
LinkedIn. People use it.
Yeah, check them out on LinkedIn. For everybody that's watching us on YouTube or listening on different podcast platforms, don't forget to hit the rate and subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up, a share. Share this episode with all of Ricky Lima's friends and family. Let them know about Undergrowth.
There you go.
And
Yeah.
stay tuned for more interviews and more things coming from the Omniverse. OmniverseComics.guide, where you get your reading orders, your podcast, your interviews, everything that you want in your comic book reading. Check it out there. Thank you, Ricky. I love you, dude.
No
Congratulations,
problem.
my
Thank
friend.
you.
You're the best.
No, you are.
Signing off, everybody. Undergrowth, September 3rd.